The militias are just, and this so-called patriot movement is just one aspect. Notice, first of all, that their slogans are very much like what the whole propaganda system has been trying to ram into your heads for 50 years. The government is the enemy, and private power doesn't exist. Okay? Now, it's obvious why big corporations who are fighting the everlasting battle for the minds of men would want that to be the picture you have. If the government is your enemy, and you can, let's say, when 83% of the population think the economic system is inherently unfair, that's supposed to mean they're angry at the government. If you can take that view, then those who run the private institutions are quite well off. There's no threat of democracy. They can run things peacefully. The people are demoralized, and the normal methods of democratic participation to gain social ends are excluded. So it makes good sense for corporate propaganda, which means most of what we see and hear. It makes it good sense for it to be trying to stress the message that the government is the enemy, and to de-stress, in fact, eliminate from sight the fact that private power exists. So government is the enemy, everybody else is in harmony. That's been the message. Well, the militias just take that a step further. You know, they kind of take it to its logical extension. Yeah, okay, government's the enemy, let's blow up the federal building. Okay? So in a sense, they're kind of hearing the indoctrination and taking it literally. Well, it also has deeper roots in American history, but apart from that, remember that this is a very cult-ridden society. The militias are a cult, and they're only one, and by no means the major one. People are isolated, they're atomized, they don't believe in the political system, they don't take part in it, they don't organize in other ways. The unions are very weak, which have been the leading democratizing force in most of modern history. This kind of constructive civil society has been very much demolished. It's kind of striking to compare the richest country in the world, the United States, with the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, namely Haiti, where peasants and people in the slums and so on did construct and have sustained, amazingly, a very lively, vibrant civil society with grassroots organizations and unions and all sorts of things, and had an effect. I mean, they got their own president into office. Well, that conception of democracy has been knocked out of people's heads here. We could do well to go to the Haitian slums and try to learn something about what democracy is. But here it has been very much dissolved. People feel lonely, isolated, atomized, me in the tube, they don't do anything with anyone else. The normal methods of interchange and constructive action, like for example unions or political organizations, are very weak by comparative standards. Well, how do people react to that? Well, one of the ways they react is people just don't give up. They form other ways of associating. And the other ways of associating are often extremely irrational. I think that's a reflection of the dissolution of functioning civil society and constructive ways of responding. The militias are just one piece of it, and they happen to be picking out the major theme of the propaganda system. You can't say they invented it. That's exactly what people are told all the time. Yeah, government's the enemy. You can't do anything through the political system because it's your enemy. So therefore let us, who run the private system, let us run everything and don't bother us. Okay, that's essentially what they're doing. So they're not inventing it. They're just exaggerating something that has been the primary theme of propaganda for 50 years. And doing it in a way which you can kind of understand in a dissolving society where there's plenty of other, and in fact much bigger and more, I think, more dangerous cults developing. Well, all of that can be reversed. It's happened in the past, and it's been reversed. Unions were much worse off in the 1920s, and they barely existed. In the 1890s, I mean, not only didn't they exist, they were being, people trying to organize were simply being murdered by security forces. In fact, that went on into the 1930s here, okay? Things are better than they were, but it can be recovered the way it's been recovered in the past. That's why we live in a better country than it was 60 years ago, much better than it was 100 years ago.